you're in the housing market right now, or you know someone who is, you know the prevailing themes. Inventory is low, demand is high, and the zeal that we saw for real estate emerge last summer has only gotten stronger this spring. But where that interest lies might be surprising to some of our viewers. And to dig into that, we have with us Sam Kling, who is a Global Cities Fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Sam, welcome to At the Market.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
So the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and the Harris Poll recently conducted a survey about people's preferences for where they live and how they've changed during the pandemic. It talked to people from big cities, from inner suburbs, and from outer suburbs. And Sam, generally, what were the findings of this survey?
Yeah, so we were trying to get at kind of more of the cultural dimension of how people feel about the places they live, because we've heard a lot of anecdotes about, some markets are hot, some markets aren't. We've heard a lot of predictions that cities are facing a big long-term decline or an exodus of people. And what we found was that really not much sign that there's going to be a big urban exodus. We found that people who lived in suburbs were content with living in the suburbs. People lived in big cities were content with living in big cities. And we actually found that people who are living in big cities are more content living in cities than people who live in suburbs are content with living in suburbs. We asked if people could choose to live anywhere they wanted, what type of community would they live in? And in big cities, we found most of them said they wanted to live in big cities. Only 8% said they wanted to live in the suburbs. Whereas among suburbanites, about 3 times as many suburbanites said they wanted to live in either a big city or a small city.
So what's the big takeaway from the survey, and what does it teach us about the future of big cities, and in particular Chicago?
I think the big takeaway is that how people feel about cities and suburbs, that's a really big, enduring thing. And for there to be a big change in terms of how people feel about urban life or suburban life, that's a big process. And if you look at history, for example, you look at the process of suburbanization in the middle of the 20th century. That was a multifaceted process. It had multiple causes. It had a lot of help from the federal government, and it took 50 years. So, and when you look at the urban revival of the past 20 or 30 years, that's another thing that took decades. So the idea that we're going to have just a complete reversal in terms of how people see cities just over the course of a year, I think is not consistent with how these big changes have occurred in the past. I think it's pretty clear from the data that these predictions of a big urban decline don't have much evidence. I think it's very likely that America remains an urban country and cities remain the places to be. We did see evidence in the survey that people are thinking about moving to different cities than what they would consider before the pandemic. But that being said, we saw a lot of strength, a lot of enthusiasm for urban life going forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So cities are here to stay, it sounds like. I would encourage everyone to check out this survey. We'll put a link to it in the video. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. If you live in Chicago or you are anywhere near Chicago, I definitely encourage you to go on the Chicago Council for Global Affairs website. It's thechicagocouncil.org. I went down that rabbit hole recently. I guarantee you I will go back. There's a lot of really interesting information there. And Sam, I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Peter.